guys and gals, and welcome to the D4A garage. Now today I'm working on my suspension again. But before I start working, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who was commenting on my previous episode of my suspension overhaul. You can see that here, you can see that here. Now what the commenters were saying is that the compressor hose I was using before, which is this horrible, tiny, flimsy hose, was not good enough for my impact wrench, and it was preventing my impact wrench from generating its full, power. So I listened to that. For some reason I completely missed the hose, I forgot about it, but you were 100% correct, and the hose was junk. So I went out and I bought an expensive, high-end, much longer, much thicker hose, which is actually suitable for my 100-liter 3-horsepower compressor. So that has been done, and today I hope that I will actually be able to remove all of my suspension components, finally, and then install my polyurethane bushings, restore these things of course before installing everything. Now this thing, I'm getting rid of this. These are the rear tie rods. This is going to junk. I'll get new ones. I'll be restoring parts like this, making them look pretty again, installing the polyurethane suspension bushings, and also installing the new ball joints and all the other suspension bits that are actually going to get the car handling, like new, and me finally be able to enjoy it, in its full potential. Of course, once I put the engine in and assemble all of that much more complicated stuff. So, no more talking. Let's get this thing, to work, and let's start wrenching. I've been struggling with the suspension for about, I think, 3 hours now. I have managed to remove my control arm. As you can see, that's gone. The ball joint was here, the control arm is gone. And I have been fighting with this torque arm or radius rod for I think, almost 2 hours now. Now removing this thing is an unbelievable pain. So this is the part I'm talking about. This thing goes so, and then this part connects to the control arm. Let me get some light there. So this connects to the torque arm, and then it connects to the chassis, as you can see, and it's called a torque arm or a radius rod. Now I have managed to remove one on the other side, on the passenger side of the suspension, and so far this has been by far the most disgusting, the hardest, the most frustrating job I have done on my MR2. And I'm going to show you on my other torque arm why it has been so disgusting. Sorry for killing the light there. So here we have the torque arm I have managed to remove. Now here's what happens. You have a bolt, and the bolt goes through the torque arm. So I can't even get it through. There's so much rust in there, and there's a nut on the other side of the bolt. Now, what happens is that inside the rubber, I don't know if you can see that, it's so dirty, inside the rubber bushing, there's actually a pin, a metal pin, and the bolt gets so rusty that it's seized to the pin, so it virtually becomes one single part with the pin, and unbolting it is almost impossible. So you get your impact wrench, you hit the bolt, and the natural flexibility of the rubber makes the impact wrench completely useless. It doesn't do anything, and you cannot remove the nut. So after struggling for an hour to remove the nut, you'll end up being helpless again. Why? Because the only way to remove the nut to get this thing to spin is to destroy the rubber that's inside, actually, is to burn away the rubber, to melt it, and that's stinky and horrible and disgusting. But that's the only way you can get the bolt to spin against the nut and remove the nut. But what happens is that you're not actually freeing the bolt from the pin, you're freeing the pin together with the bolt, you're freeing it from the rubber. So what you end up having is the pin still seized to the bolt and the bolt just spinning inside rubber. Now that wouldn't be so horrible if you could actually hammer the bolt out from the other side. But the MR2, at least the first generation that I know of, is designed like this. Let me show you that. So you can see, look, there's a big piece of chassis. I don't know if they can, yeah, the camera is zooming, sorry. So there's a big piece of chassis there. You see that? And there's no way for you to get anything, you know, straight in there. Hook. You cannot get anything straight in there because of this thing to hammer the bolt out. So this turns into a horribly, horribly frustrating thing. Now I'm gonna try fighting this for, you know, a few more times, heating it up, and then you know, putting penetrant, you know, lubricating penetrant in it. And if I fail after about half an hour, I'm gonna quit this. And I have brought a hole saw, a electric hole saw. There it is. And what I'm gonna do, I have some very long blades. I'm gonna cut the bolt in two pieces and get this removed. So let's fight some more. Wish me luck, and I hope I get to remove the bolt without having to cut it, because the bolts that are used in suspension, these bolts, these are all grade 8 and grade 9 bolts. That means they are so this is even, I think, grade 10, that's even worse. That means these are a very, very tough alloy, and removing these things, actually not removing them, sorry, cutting them is a horrible, horrible pain in the bum. So let's fight some more and see what happens. So this bastard is finally out of the car. Now at the end I had to resort to cutting. I actually used my angle grinder. The hole saw was completely useless. Now even cutting it up with the angle grinder wasn't easy. Access to one side was super easy, and cutting off that side was easy, but cutting the other side of the bolt was a horrible pain. I had to pry this radius rod to one side, and as you can see, I even managed to make a tiny cut on the body of the radius rod itself. So even cutting was a pain, but it was unfortunately the only solution. I didn't do any damage to the chassis, which I'm happy about, and this is, to be honest, pretty much just cosmetical damage, so no concerns there. So this was horrible, frustrating, painful, I don't know what else to say, but I'm happy it's finally out. Next up, it's the front suspension, and I hope the front suspension will be a bit more merciful towards me than the rear suspension was. Now, I hope that this episode would actually contain the removal of the entire suspension, but the whole suspension restoration actually keeps being just a little tiny steps at a time, because I have to say this was by far the most physically demanding job I have ever done on my car. I thought removing the engine using just wood and all of my DIY methods was hard, but to be honest, removing these seized up bolts from the suspension that nobody has probably touched in 30 years is a horrible pain. I'm happy that I even managed to make this much progress. So as I said, all of the rear is finally done, and the front suspension is coming up in the next episode. I hope I'll be able to do it. And the next episode will contain the removal of everything finally, and then I'll take all the suspension to be the little bits, to be sandblasted and probably powder coated, so it all looks really nice. Before that, I of course need to remove all the old rubber bushings, which I guess won't be, as hard because I have already damaged some of them pretty substantially. So I guess that's it for this episode of the suspension overhaul. I'm sorry there isn't more progress, but I guess this goes to show just how demanding this job actually is. So thanks for watching, thanks for all of your support. As always, don't forget to share, like, comment and subscribe, and see you soon on the D4A channel.